Jesus sat with his disciples on a hill overlooking a vast field. The setting sun bathed the landscape in a warm, golden light, creating a serene backdrop for a moment of deep reflection. The field stretched out below, a vibrant tapestry of greens and golds swaying gently in the evening breeze. Despite the tranquil scene, the disciples were troubled, each burdened by their own anxieties and doubts. Peter was the first to break the silence. "Master, I find it hard to focus on anything but the potential dangers we face. Every day brings new challenges and I cannot help but imagine the worst possible outcomes. It's as if my mind won't allow me to rest even when I know I should." James, known for his fiery spirit, added, "I've been wrestling with my thoughts too. My mind is filled with worries about whether I am truly living up to your teachings, Jesus. I constantly replay my actions and conversations, questioning if I am doing enough." John, the beloved disciple, looked troubled. "I too have been consumed by doubts. I fear that my faith is not strong enough, that I am not worthy of the path you have set before us. These thoughts are like shadows that follow me, clouding my mind and heart." Jesus listened attentively, his compassionate gaze reflecting the depth of his understanding. He could see that their worries were like a tangled web, ensnaring their minds and preventing them from fully experiencing the peace and joy that he desired for them. Seeing their distress, Jesus decided to share a parable to illustrate a powerful lesson about overthinking and the importance of focusing on what truly matters. "There was once a diligent farmer," Jesus began, his voice calm and steady, "who owned a large piece of land. This farmer was known throughout the region for his meticulous care and attention to his fields. He planted only the best seeds, ensuring that every row was perfectly straight. He watered his crops precisely when needed and spent hours inspecting the soil, the plants, and even the tiniest details." The disciples listened intently, picturing the farmer's dedicated efforts. They could almost see him working in the fields, his hands working tirelessly to cultivate his land. One day, Jesus continued, the farmer noticed something that troubled him greatly. Wild weeds had begun to sprout among his crops. These weeds were unruly and threatened to choke the life out of his carefully planted seeds. The farmer became consumed with worry. He could not bear the thought of these weeds ruining his harvest. Day and night, he was preoccupied with the weeds, his mind filled with images of them spreading and overtaking his crops. Jesus paused, allowing the gravity of the farmer's anxiety to settle in. The disciples felt a familiar sense of unease, recognizing their own struggles in the farmer's plight. The farmer decided he must rid his field of these weeds immediately, Jesus continued. He spent hours each day pulling them out, examining every inch of his land, searching for any new growth. But no matter how many weeds he removed, more seemed to appear. The more he worried and worked, the more the weeds multiplied, and the more his crops began to suffer from the constant disturbance. The disciples could see the farmer's frustration, his efforts to control the situation leading only to further complications. It was a vivid reflection of their own experiences, where focusing too much on their worries seemed to make things worse. One day, Jesus said, an old, wise farmer from a neighboring village came to visit. He had heard of the younger farmer's distress and came to offer his counsel. Observing the younger farmer's weary state, he asked, "Why do you spend all your time pulling weeds and worrying about them? Do you not trust that your crops, if healthy, can grow strong despite a few weeds?" The younger farmer, frustrated and exhausted, replied, "But these weeds are everywhere. If I do not remove them, they will ruin everything I have worked for." The old farmer smiled gently and said, "The weeds are a part of life in the field. You cannot control every plant that grows, but you can control how much care you give to your crops. If you focus on nurturing what is good and healthy, the weeds will become insignificant. They may grow, but they will not overtake what is strong and well tended. Your field will thrive if you allow your crops to grow without constant disturbance." Jesus let the story linger in the air, allowing the disciples to reflect on the wisdom of the old farmer's advice. The disciples began to see the connection between the farmer's plight and their own struggles with overthinking. They understood that their incessant focus on their worries was akin to the farmer's endless weeding, which only served to disrupt the good work that God had planted in their hearts. Jesus then turned to his disciples, his voice filled with warmth and compassion. "The field represents your mind and heart. The crops are the virtues and strengths that God has planted within you: faith, hope, love, and trust. The weeds are the worries, doubts, and fears that can take root if you allow them to. By focusing too much on the weeds, you risk neglecting the good seeds that God has sown." He continued, "Prayer is a powerful tool for nurturing the good seeds. When you pray, you bring your worries to God and ask for His guidance. You release control and invite Him into your struggles. Through prayer, you can shift your focus from what you cannot control to what you can, your own heart and mind. By focusing on God and His goodness, you allow the weeds of worry to become less significant. The disciples listened, absorbing the depth of the lesson. They realized that they had been allowing their worries to overshadow the good that God had placed within them. By focusing on their fears and trying to control every detail, they had lost sight of the strength and peace that God provided. Jesus continued, "Think of how the field changes as you focus on nurturing the crops. The plants grow stronger, the soil becomes richer, and the weeds become less of a threat. Similarly, when you focus on nurturing your faith, love, and hope, you will find that the worries and doubts diminish. They may still be present, but they will not dominate your mind or heart." To illustrate further, Jesus expanded on the story with additional details. Consider that the farmer's field was not just a plot of land but a reflection of his inner world. His constant focus on the weeds was like a mirror reflecting his fears and anxieties. When he began to trust the wisdom of the old farmer, he realized that his field, his heart and mind, could be a place of growth and abundance if he chose to focus on what was good. The disciples were silent, deeply moved by the insight Jesus had provided. They began to see their own struggles with overthinking as part of a larger pattern, one that could be addressed by shifting their focus and trusting in God's care. Jesus continued to elaborate on the parable, drawing out additional layers of meaning. Just as the farmer's field needed time to recover and flourish, so too do your hearts and minds need time to heal and grow. When you find yourself overwhelmed by worries, take a moment to step back and assess what is truly important. Focus on nurturing your relationship with God, cultivating virtues, and trusting in His plan. Allow yourself the grace to let go of the need to control every detail. He added, "In the same way that the farmer needed to trust that his field would thrive despite the presence of some weeds, you too must trust that God's plan for you is greater than your worries. Your faith and hope in Him will help you navigate the challenges you face, and you will find that the good seeds He has planted in you will grow and bear fruit." Jesus then shared a practical example from His own experience. "There were times when I too faced doubts and challenges. When I prayed, when I sought God's guidance, I was able to focus on the mission before me rather than the obstacles in my path. By trusting in God and focusing on the purpose He had set for me, I was able to overcome my own fears and continue the work He had called me to do." The disciples reflected on Jesus' example, understanding that even he had faced struggles and doubts, but his trust in God had guided him through. They began to see that their own overthinking could be addressed by following Jesus' example, by shifting their focus, nurturing their faith, and trusting in God's care. As the evening wore on, Jesus continued to engage the disciples in discussion, encouraging them to share their thoughts and insights. The conversations were rich and heartfelt, as each disciple reflected on their personal experiences and how the lesson from the parable applied to their own lives. Peter spoke first. "I see now that my constant worry about the dangers we face has been preventing me from fully embracing the peace and confidence that God offers. I have been so focused on the potential threats that I have neglected the strength and hope that God has planted in me." James added, "I realize that my doubts and fears have clouded my ability to see the good that God is doing in my life. By focusing on nurturing my faith and trust in Him, I can let go of the need to control every outcome and find peace in the journey." John reflected on the lesson, saying, "I have been so preoccupied with my insecurities that I forgot to focus on the love and grace that God has given me. By shifting my focus to nurturing these virtues, I believe I can find the strength to overcome my doubts and embrace the life God has called me to live." Jesus listened with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that the disciples had begun to grasp the deeper meaning of the parable. He encouraged them to continue reflecting on the lesson and to apply it in their daily lives. "Remember," he said, "that overcoming overthinking is a journey, not a destination. It requires ongoing effort and trust in God. As you continue to focus on nurturing the good seeds within you, you will find that the worries and doubts that once consumed you will become less significant." The disciples left the hill that evening with a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. They felt a deepened understanding of the lesson Jesus had taught them and a commitment to apply it in their lives. They knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but they were equipped with the wisdom to face those challenges with faith and trust in God. As they walked together, their conversations were filled with hope and encouragement. They discussed practical ways to apply the lesson, such as setting aside time for prayer, focusing on positive affirmations, and supporting one another in their spiritual journeys. The story of the farmer and the wild weeds had become more than just a parable, it had become a guiding principle for their lives. The disciples knew that by focusing on nurturing their faith, hope, and love, and by trusting in God's care, they could overcome the overthinking that had once held them back. In the days that followed, the disciples practiced the lesson from the parable, finding strength and peace in their renewed focus. They experienced the transformation that came from shifting their attention from worries to the good seeds that God had planted within them. As they continued their journey with Jesus, they carried with them the wisdom of the farmer's story, a reminder that while they could not control every detail, they could choose to nurture what was good and trust in God's plan. Their hearts and minds became like well-tended fields, growing strong and fruitful in the presence of God's love and care. The parable of the farmer and the wild weeds had not only provided a powerful lesson on overcoming overthinking, but it had also deepened the disciples' understanding of their faith. They had learned that by focusing on the good, nurturing their relationship with God, and trusting in His wisdom, they could find peace and purpose amidst the challenges of life. And so, the disciples continued their journey with a renewed sense of hope and clarity, knowing that the lessons they had learned would guide them through the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. The story of the farmer and the wild weeds became a cherished teaching, one that they would share with others as they went forth to spread the message of love and faith that Jesus had entrusted to them. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe my channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.